Everyone, and thanks for joining us. I'm absolutely thrilled to be giving you this webinar. Ed and Dana usually keep me locked in the back office, and they don't let me out very often. So the opportunity to speak to some members of the community is very exciting. And we are very excited to introduce to you what's going to be a fantastic year for Mifos in 2016 for us, our partners, and our community of users, because we're going to be launching generation 3 of our technology. And what I want to go over today is actually, I'll be talking about generation 3, which we're calling Mifos IO, but I want to put it into the context of the 2 previous generations and sort of just, I think context is very important. And I'm going to sort of reintroduce you to how we got to generation 3 by giving you a brief overview of generations 1 and 2. And when I say generation 3, I don't mean version 3. I mean a whole new generation of our technology. And then also I want to introduce the fact that we are now an Apache project. And for those of you who are technical, you'll know that being an Apache project is an astonishing accomplishment that's going to be to the benefit of all of us, and I'll go over that. So let me begin by giving us the context of the 2 generations of Mifos X, of Mifos, and I'll move into the description of our 3rd generation. So many of you know that Mifos is an award-winning nonprofit, free, and open source software project. But sometimes we forget that we have won astonishing awards for the technology and the accomplishments that, that we as a community have achieved. And we are a community dedicated to ending poverty 1 line of code at a time. And what I like to say when I meet people who are joining our community as partners or users, they're aware that Mifos is a nonprofit, but I always say to them, we are not a nonprofit. And I say that to shock them and get their attention. And then I say we're a software company, because what we do is build world-class software, which you as the partners and users then deploy and use for the public good in bringing financial inclusion to the world. In the context of building that software, we have worked with a community of innovators all around the globe in building 2 generations of Mifos technology. Now that first generation goes way back to the days when Mifos was a project at the Apache Foundation Tech Center. I don't know how many of you ever saw or used what at that time was called Mifos 1.0 and then Mifos version 2, Mifos 2. It was what was called an MIS, that was an old term from the past, a management information system. It was focused on microfinance institutions exclusively. Our customers were in India, and it was focused on Grameen joint liability style lending, which is the type of microfinance invented by Muhammad Yunus, who was our honorary chairman, and for which he won the Nobel Peace Prize. So that goes way back. When Mifos left the Grameen Foundation, Ed and I took it over, and we started a whole new generation of software. And that is what is now called Mifos X. And it's a new generation because it was a completely new code base. It was cloud-based, it was modular, it was able for partners to build their own work rules and user interfaces on top of it. It was much better, much cleaner code for the open source community. And it expanded well beyond open Grameen joint liability style lending. It had individual lending and agricultural loans and lines of credit. We've added savings functionality. We then added business rules and accounting and so it became a whole management information system. And I'm not a management information, but a whole core banking system. And that's what all of you have been deploying your customers on. Mifos X has actually now achieved deployment at scale. We have 35 different countries, over 40 partners, over 150 institutions. There's a deployment in India with rural banks that's going to deploy 150 institutions, which will more than double our installed base. So Mifos X is actually achieving everything we ever hoped it would be, which is self-sustainability as a community and deployment at scale. But we as a community are now moving on to generation 3. And this is what the innovators at our Innovation Summit have told us that they really need. We respond to the needs of our community as they express it from the understanding they have from their customers. So I'll go into Generation 3 in further detail, but just as a simple overview, Generation 3 is really unprecedented. It's going to be complete banking infrastructure as free and open source software. It'll, of course, be cloud-based, but fully mobile-enabled, scalable to millions, upon which any mobile app can be configured and deployed so you can deliver financial services to anyone, anywhere. And with Mifos IO, as we call it, truly the smallest of teams is going to be able to deliver the biggest of ideas with the greatest reach. And more importantly, we're focusing on sustainability. And it's so important that you as partners and your customers have sustainability. So Mifos IO is going to also be offered as a pay-as-you-grow on-demand utility. So an actual banking as a service. And what this does is it keeps the innovators and the partners' operating costs low and your time to market fast. And what we like to say is that Mifos is the innovation that powers the innovators. And sometimes we tend to forget just how innovative as a community we are. I find this an amazing example of innovation. The Zambezi Prize is offered by the MasterCard Foundation and MIT to innovators in financial inclusion. Now, Mifos itself didn't win the Zambezi Prize, but in 2015, first prize, second prize, and third prize are all powered by Mifos. Essentially, Mifos swept the Zambezi Prize. And many of you are familiar with Mifos. Mifos built the world's first 100% mobile, 100% cashless, 100% paperless financial inclusion institution. And they're powered by Mifos, and they've received global recognition. So Mifos truly is the innovation that powers the innovators, and our Generation 3 is going to be a breakthrough. So what I'd like to do now is go much deeper into Generation 3. Let me bring that up. Okay. So we are starting to use the term that we're thought leaders around of financial inclusion 2.0. We believe it's a whole new landscape that's emerging for which a whole new generation of technology is needed. Now, why do you need financial inclusion 2.0? Well, we all know that financial inclusion works, but we also know that there's still 2 billion people in the world who are excluded from full participation in the financial system. And yes, that's down from 2.5 billion, but there are regions of the world where it's going back up, and the old way of doing things isn't keeping pace. The costs are too high, access is too hard, innovation is too slow, and so a whole new approach is needed. And we have the tools to make that whole new approach possible. So what we're looking at are certain barriers to the more rapid and complete spread of financial inclusion, and our Generation 3, we think, directly addresses those barriers with solutions. So you have your providers of financial inclusion, that's us and our partners and your financial institution customers, and you want to reach the clients around the world. But there are certain barriers to entry. One is very high startup costs, the investment needed to bring banking infrastructure to market. There's the high operating costs. There's the fact that so many times you have to build the infrastructure and the back end from scratch over and over again. And then there's the fact there's slow time to market. That's why we still have 2 billion people excluded from the financial system. So Mifos, of course, is free and open source banking software. That addresses the fact that you don't have to invest hundreds of thousands of dollars in upfront capital costs to obtain your software. But Mifos IO, our generation 3, is going to be a complete banking as a service. It's a pay-as-you-grow on-demand service where the smaller you are, the less your operating costs would be, and the larger you are, you would pay as an on-demand service, just like your water bill or your electricity bill. And then Mifos IO will be completely delivered as banking as a service, one of the first pure banking as a service offerings. And it provides fast and agile product delivery. So Mifos eliminates these barriers to entry and makes the providers fast and agile. And what it really does is means you can focus on building apps, not infrastructure. In the world we're going into, virtually every financial service will be expressed as a mobile app. And that mobile app will be tailored to the needs of the region, the institution, and the customers. And what you want to be able to do is focus on your business and your customers and not on infrastructure. So in fact, what we're entering into a world is where when money is digital and every phone is a bank, every person is accessible at low cost, and every conceivable financial service is simply an app. And the incumbent banks know this. They know that software and innovators like our community are coming into the market to solve the problems they can't. And so that takes us to Mifos IO. I want to give you a very brief overview of the technology architecture. I'm not going to go into in great technical detail. We're going to have a number of technical conferences, technical sessions that you can go into this deeper on. But here's a block diagram of the architecture. And you'll notice that Mifos X is just one of many blocks. Mifos X, if you look at it fairly, is a great product for financial inclusion. It's a core banking system for small and medium-sized banks, but it's one entire product. You deploy the whole product, and then you use those parts of it that you need. What Markus and our architectural team are doing with Mifos IO is breaking down all of Mifos X into separate microservices. He's introducing a whole new system of command processing, event processing, rules processing. We're introducing not just a relational database, as you all know we use MySQL now, but a NoSQL database and a business rules engine. We're adding business domains such as know your customer, portfolio management, transaction processing, which will lead to payment and transaction system connectors, and fraud and risk management. And all of these become services which you simply configure into the banking service that you want through account management and transaction interoperability. So very soon, well not soon, but across 2016 and 2017, as Markus and his architectural team release the various versions of Mifos IO, you'll see that Mifos X sort of dissolves away into a set of services that you simply call through a configuration framework called the Spring Framework. And then the Spring Cloud Framework allows you to configure and distribute and manage this in clusters so that you can scale up to any size that you want. So it's a very modern, very powerful application framework built around a microservices architecture that is scalable literally to tens upon tens of millions of accounts as we go after the 2 billion in the world who are under and unbanked. Now, that's a very high-level view of the architecture, but this architecture is so innovative that we've actually now are an Apache project. And I'll talk about what that means when I'm finished with this section of the presentation. Okay. But what I want to do now is take a look at not the technical architecture, but the solution architecture of banking as a service. What Mifos.org is going to do in 2016 is take the Mifos IO framework and put it onto an operational platform and wrap it in a security cocoon and offer it as banking as a service, the infrastructure. And when it's offered as a platform with security, what any one particular client of our partners, what any one particular banking institution has is simply a configuration of the framework that meets their banking needs and upon which they have employee and client-facing apps. In other words, the entire banking system is simply a configuration of the framework, and this means that the infrastructure is so easy to deploy. Additionally, through our transaction interoperability service, you'll be able to have in-network transfers and payments that remain within the financial services cloud and that eliminates the costs and the fees and the transaction commissions for in-network transfers amongst shared banking institutions and clients. And you'll have transaction connectivity out to ATM networks, national switches, clearinghouses, and payment gateways. And then, of course, because it's open source and built as an enterprise application, you've got back office connectivity to the other business systems you need. What this really means for our partners, our community, and the institutions that use us is that the focus for the partner and the institution is on the client-facing value add. You don't have to build and operate the infrastructure. You don't have to spend 80% of your time and your client's money reinventing and rebuilding that infrastructure. Instead, you focus on what's the configuration of the underlying financial services or banking services that deliver what this bank needs in its market today, and what are those apps, both employee-facing on tablets and smartphones and client-facing on feature phones and smartphones that deliver value to the under and unbanked. And from your point of view as partners, it means your customers can spend their money on meaningful value add, and you have a very clear value proposition delivering services that immediately add value to the customer. So you focus on configuration and apps and not infrastructure. To make all of that possible, Mifos.org is going to be hosting a service. Now, you could actually go to all the effort of building up this service yourself. It's open source code, so around the world, some people will choose to run the entire service themselves, but there's a lot of work in offering banking as a service. And Mifos.org, for its partners, so that they can focus on their customers' business needs, will be offering the entire physical layer, the virtualization layer, the data storage and back-end systems layer, and then 4 different services with 4 different service teams: application level services, compliance level services, security and infrastructure level services. All of this will be a back-end banking as a service utility that we'll be able to turn on for you anywhere at any time, and that you only need to charge your customers for as they grow. And you'll be able to focus on the configuration of this service that meets their need and the apps that they can deliver it with. And you can have any deployment that you want. You can have a public cloud for those who understand that probably the most secure and reliable place to run their banking as a service is indeed Amazon. But for those who simply must have an in-country third-party data center, it can be deployed there. And perish the thought, for those who want customer premise equipment, it can be deployed there. So you can have any configuration of a public cloud or a private cloud with the Mifos banking service. So that's a very high-level overview of where we're going with Mifos IO. And remember, we're having a technical conference early in the year. I'll talk about that in a minute. And we have an ongoing development thread and email list around Mifos IO that you can join. So what I'd like to do now is tell you about Apache. So I'm sure those of you in the audience who are technical are aware of the Apache Software Foundation. It is the most prestigious manager of open source projects with a world-class reputation. It was started in 1999 around simply the Apache web server, which you may not know, it's now grown to have over 300 and almost 350 projects. Some of those projects may be not well known, but most are extremely well known. Apache software projects run the internet. The entire internet would not be possible without these Apache software projects. And Apache software projects run today's global enterprises. There's over 300, almost 350 projects. There's 550 members who've been elected to the foundation, and there's almost 5,000 software committers. So this is a very, very prestigious open source foundation. We have now joined, and you have to have an Apache name when you join. Our project is called Apache Fineract. If you Google Apache Fineract, you'll find the initial website for the project, and essentially the Mifos X code and the Mifos IO code is now being developed as an Apache project. Okay, and you can go to Apache Fineract and start learning what that means. But let me just give you a little diagram for those of you who may wish to understand this better of what this means. Apache Fineract is going to be the project, and an Apache community is a group of individual developers all around the globe, just as we are, just as Mifos is, who contribute and commit and communicate with each other, and they're governed by what's called the Apache Way and the Project Management Committee. So what that really means is Mifos.org becomes one of equal peers with all the other members of the community. So Mifos Systems has joined the project, Conflux has joined the project, you may know those names, they're two of our larger partners. Mifos.org, of course, has joined the project. All other current partners, new partners, fintech startups, they can all join the project, and they all become equal. But each of them then uses the open source code for their own mission, be it social or nonprofit, or some people may use it for profit. And they deploy customers, they support their customers, they gather requirements, and they contribute those requirements and code back to the Fineract project. But each of them has their own community of customers. And Mifos.org is continuing its social mission. It's continuing its mission of supporting the partners who want to enter into the community, developing the Mifos X particular configuration of its core banking system, which will be based on the Fineract code. But Mifos has its own Mifos system. Conflux is developing its system, and others who are on this call and who have yet to join the community but will are all developing their own code, their own solutions, their own customer-facing solutions, all off this shared code base, and developing their own customer communities. So I can go into more of the Apache project, but at this point I'll take a pause, and I think it might be useful if Ed and Dana and Markus, if you've been looking at the questions, or if there are any questions, if we can maybe have a discussion of what I just presented about Mifos IO, if there are any.
So I don't think, Craig, apart from just one functional question that came through the chat, we've had many questions, but let me open the floor now to anybody that has a question to ask it right now. So if you have a question, please either raise your hand or send a message to the chat, and we'll unmute you so you can verbally ask that question. And then, Craig, the question I had, and you might be getting to it, so what's the time frame on Mifos IO? Like, when can we expect to see this?
I'm sorry, I have that. I have that slide, although my screen's gone blank for some reason. I don't know why. Let me bring up the timeline. Not quite sure why my slide's gone blank. Okay.
Okay, while Mr. Chelius is trying to find the slide, Donald asked when the expected first release of Apache Fineract is coming. So we're started to transfer over the complete code and need to do some adjustments like licensing and naming and things like that. But we expect to have the first release, which would then be called 0.10, in 4 to 6 weeks. So that's the expected span for the first release. And then we will start adding features as usual.
Yeah, and so you can see we were only just accepted as an Apache Incubation project. Incubation is the onboarding process in late December 2015. Markus is going to go through that code adjustment process. In March of this year, we're having our Tech Days Developers Conference in Amsterdam. This is very much focused on developers who are using the Mifos X and will be using the Mifos IO code base, but then we have to start transitioning the language to the name of the project is now Apache Fineract. And that's in March in 2016, and Markus will have the first very early test release of the code base in March. At the end of Q2, so June 30th, July 1st, we're going to have general release 1. And then in Q3 and Q4, we're going to have 3 or 4 very carefully selected early adopter customers who will go through pilot testing. They'll be intimately associated with their partner and with us, Mifos.org, to make sure the pilot test goes well. Case studies will be released. And then at some point when we are satisfied with the pilot tests, we'll tell folks that this is absolutely ready for business use. So it's going to be a very busy 2016. Markus, did I get those dates right?
Yes, you get that dates right.
I'm thinking of sliding them forward a quarter. Can I slide them forward a quarter? Would that be all right?
What do you mean by forward? So making it later?
Just joking.
So I'm rephrasing Patrick's question, right? So he asked if it's going purely cloud-based or if there's also a possibility to deploy it where no internet connection is available, right? And I already answered that. So you can still deploy it on one PC and run it with a client locally connecting to that system like we're doing it today, right? So you also today could simply download everything, run it on one PC, and you're good, right? And this will still be the same, right? The only difference is that we now simply add real cloud ability to it so that you really can scale different services on your need. But if you don't need that, right, and simply want to run it on your laptop,
you can always run it on this. Go ahead.
Then you could simply deploy it on your laptop and that's it, right? But then you could only scale if you have another laptop and you link them via whatever kind of networking.
That's what we would call financial inclusion 1.0 configuration, and you'll always be able to do that. But where we're trying to go, want to go, where the world must go, is to financial inclusion 2.0, where everything is a mobile app. The penetration of mobile phones is virtually complete. With feature phones, they're being converted to smartphones. You look ahead 2 to 3 years, 4 years, every client you want to reach is going to have a very full-featured feature phone or a cheap smartphone. Internet connectivity is simply getting better, and financial inclusion 2.0 recognizes that every financial service can be delivered as a mobile app, and that these mobile apps are much cheaper, much faster, and could be configured with much greater agility than the old way of doing things. So if you want, absolutely you can do it the 1.0 way, but we're moving forward into financial inclusion 2.0. And the service that we will offer to our partners, by definition has to be cloud-based, otherwise how can we offer it to you? So any other questions that have come in, Ed? Or any other comments?
So let me start once again with Patrick, right? So he's working in an organization mainly in the rural communities, and they have mobile connectivity, but mostly not 3G services, right? So I think one huge thing that we already started working on in Mifos X, and that definitely will be part of the reference clients that we implement for Mifos IO, is simply offline capability. Right, so you will be able to go out into the field with whatever kind of tablet, your mobile or what, right, and simply collect the data, go back to your office, and then upload it and synchronize it with the server. So that's something that would still allow you to use cloud services, but if there's no connectivity, then it will simply be stored on the device you're working with. And once you're back in the connectivity, I'm sorry, then you could simply synchronize it so that you could use a decent cloud service for your real installation, right? And also make sure that backups and things are really decent so that nothing get lost for any reason. But if you go out in a rural area, you could simply use an offline mode of it.
Yes.
So Carlos asked if Mifos IO is planned to be a Mifos initiative-steered comprehensive SaaS core banking solution based on Apache Fineract project. So Mifos IO will simply be our distribution tailored for microfinance and financial inclusion institutions. And you can either take it and run it on your own, or you can simply come over to us and let us host that stuff and pay whatever kind of fee we will collect at the end of the day, and so you're good.
So Carlos, essentially, yes, you've got that right.
But as Markus said, Carlos, yeah, the whole framework's available open source, so if you did want to host it on your own or build your applications on your own without hosting provided by the Mifos initiative, you're able to do that as well. So Markus, you're covering Carlos's other questions?
Yes, that's what I'm trying currently, right? So Carlos asked what are the requirements to graduate out from Apache Fineract. So there are only two requirements. One is that you are able to create software releases, and I think we are able to do that because we're currently doing it on a quarter base, right? And the second thing is that they want to see that the community is engaging within the project. So I expect that the platform developer community and user community will also engage in the Apache Fineract. And once this has happened, we are ready to graduate. We already had a talk with some of the leading guys at Apache, and we also thought about maybe skipping incubation and jumping right into TLP, being a top-level project right from the beginning. But we decided not to do that because we simply want to follow the real policies and real rules. And we expect, if the code is there, we expect to be out of incubation and become a TLP within 90 days. Because we already have everything that is needed to become a top-level project. And we only need to show that we not only talking, we're really doing something.
So we've already gone through everything that's grayed out. We established the project, we became a candidate, we were accepted. We're now in what Apache uses this phrase podling. We're a podling, we're engaged. We will become a top-level project. Once we're a top-level project, there's a number of different roles that people can play in Apache. You can simply be a user of the system, and that, of course, is the financial institutions that are currently deploying Mifos X and in the future who deploy new systems built on Mifos IO. You can be a code contributor. We have many code contributors now, and one of the benefits of Apache is the ability to bring in more contributors. In particular, what Apache offers the world is world-class governance, so you know that the project is going to always be there. For all the great things Mifos.org does, as we grow, we run into projects, developers, companies, institutions who say, well, who's Mifos? Who's Mifos.org? You know, who's Ed? Who's Craig? Who's Dana? Who's Markus? Those questions go away when you're managed by, when you're an Apache project. and so we hope to grow the contributors. You can become a committer, and once you're a committer, you can commit code, and you don't need anyone's permission to do that. And that's also what makes Apache very attractive to other development teams, other companies and partners that want to start using it, is you're not beholden to anyone else's permission to commit your code to it. If you become very active in the community, you can become a member of the PMC, which is the Project Management Committee. And you actually become one of the leaders of the project. You probably don't become the chair of the PMC, because the chair actually has to be one of the few elected members of the Apache Software Foundation. There are only 500 of those. I guess you could say they're like the bishops, if you will. So you can choose which level of participation you want in Apache.
Okay, so another question from Hendrik. I simply wanted to reiterate so that everybody's aware of what's going on in the chat, right? So Hendrik asks, if the current Mifos X is a web application, right, will the user-facing part of Mifos X, so the community app, then become an app for Mifos IO? And this will be the case. So once we have the bits and pieces in place for Mifos IO, we will simply turn the community app over from the Mifos X backend to the Mifos IO backend. So the application for the user will stay the same, right? It will use another backend service, which shouldn't really the user need to care about. And it also will be the free and open source application that the Mifos.org community will offer, right? Like also the Android client. The Android client is another one that needs to switch over once we're there, right? And then those are the two things that you could use as in free open source software. So it will stay the same.
Any other questions or comments? Yeah, I really like the comment. Yes, and I really like the comment that Wycliffe just gave. This ability to abstract away all of the complexity of the infrastructure and let partners and customers focus here, which is the value add, which is how we will get financial services to the 2 billion who are still waiting for them, is what Financial Inclusion 2.0 and Mifos IO is all about. So we're very, very excited to be launching what is now the 3rd generation of our technology. And you're going to see a lot more announcements and a lot of activity from us across 2016. For those of you who can come to the developers conference in Amsterdam, please do. For those of you who can't, you'll see a lot of updates come from it. And you can follow us, if not by joining us in Amsterdam, at the Fineract website. Markus, can you give just a little description of how they should engage with Fineract, with the email list, with the developer community, so that they can start being engaged or at least tracking?
Yeah, I can. So, but before I do that, I simply want to add one thing to what you said, Craig, right? So the tech days in Amsterdam in March are not only towards developers, right? It's also towards IT personnels that are a bit more sophisticated. So at least you should know what an AWS is, right? And there you will simply see how we will deal with microservices and also how the first components and services will play together so that you can get a feeling on what we are doing and where we're heading to. So if you're a techie, either it's a developer or maybe you're a DevOps guy or you're simply an administrator running all that stuff and know a bit more than clicking a button, then this should be the place where you need to go, right? Because there you will see what we will do in 2016 and what you will deal with starting end of the year once we have our first validations run through. So just to clarify that. The ways how you can engage with Apache Fineract is simply there are two public mailing lists. One is devs@fineract.incubator.apache.org, where all the developers are simply sharing their ideas and discussing things. And the other one is the same for users, right? It's the users@fineract.incubator.apache.org, where users can discuss things. And if you want to start being part of that, simply jump over and subscribe, right? That's all you need to do. And once you're subscribed, you will get all threads that are running there, and you could participate in every conversation and provide input or get feedback or whatever you want to do there. So this is the main entry point how you could engage with the Apache Fineract project. Jump over and choose one of the lists or choose both, right? And simply subscribe yourself and be part of what's going on at Fineract, and specifically be part of a new evolution.
Thank you, Markus.
You're welcome.
Okay. Oh, ooh, Markus, there's a great question from Andre. Do you see it?
Yes, I'm seeing it, and I'm currently thinking about that question. So,
Yeah,
Andre, if
that
you
requires a little bit of thought.
yeah, so Andre, if you like, you could unmute, right? So we not start ping-ponging questions via the chat. So as far as I understand you are asking if it would be possible to use Mifos client-facing apps, let's say like the Android client, and simply interact with non-Mifos core banking systems. Is this the main
Correct.
content, or right? Okay.
Correct. I'm working on a couple of projects where, unfortunately, the bank already has a core banking system, and that is not Mifos. So yeah, but still.
Yeah. So the idea that we're currently looking at is, I'm not sure if you know about fast payment system in the UK, for example.
No, please go ahead.
No?
Tell me.
Okay, so the fast payment system is simply some special kind of operator in the middle of the banks, right? And the banks simply decided to create that kind of service on their own. And what they can do is simply send information to that fast payment system, and the payment system is routing the information to the right banking system. So it's some kind of an immediate automatic clearhousing. It's more like a real-time payment processing, or more transaction processing. And that's exactly one of the components that we also will have, right? So we will create some kind of what we call the transaction interoperability, right? That allows you to send information from one of our Mifos client applications to our middleware, and the middleware then simply will figure out the routing to the right banking system. And also is doing the transformation from our internal transaction message style to the style that is needed on that system.
Okay, so the answer is yes, but we would use an intermediate layer to do this, a service to do this.
Right, so at the end of the day, there will be a bunch of connectors below this intermediate layer, right? And you do not need to install the Mifos core banking system if you don't want to use it, right? So the only thing you would need would be the transaction interoperability with the correct connectors to connect to multiple banks. Because at the end of the day, you maybe don't want to simply want to connect to one bank, you maybe want to connect to multiple banks, right? And then you would simply run this one component, and it will simply take care that everything runs right. And
okay, that is sufficient as an answer, so I'm happy to hear that, and we should talk about this another time in more detail. Thank you, Markus.
Yes, you're more than welcome.
And Markus, the link to the Apache developer site, is that all available through your main page, right? If you get to the Apache Fineract web location?
Yes. So if you go to the Apache Fineract location, then you could simply jump to the link contribute, right? And there you will directly be found the links to the Fineract site, but I will also post them to the chat now so that everybody can
Thank you.
look at it, right? You're welcome.
All right, we have been on for 50 minutes. Do we have any wrap-up questions or comments, or shall we let everyone head off to the rest of their day? Okay, Ed, is that?
Oh, there was one other question from Mutumba. Markus, did you want to cover that? The AML, so the anti-money laundering, and the new Mifos I framework.
Yes.
Just a second, right? I'm a developer, so I could only do one thing at a time. I'm not multi-threading.
Right. Well, we got to get you a microservices or architected brain, Markus.
Yes. Maybe we should. And then we also need to find more hardware for myself so that I could run more services and whatever. So the question of Wycliffe is, are there plans to include AML in this new I/O framework? So the simple answer is yes. And the more complicated answer is we will provide some basic anti-money laundering algorithms, right, that are based on whatever kind of requirements we can gather. And I think at the end of the day, there will be some special software companies / partners that are more sophisticated in that space that would offer some more dedicated services, right? But we will have some AML in it just because we need it on the KYC part too, right? So there will be some AML included, but it will mainly be pretty straightforward things that we now can wrap up in our mind.
If you look at the block diagram I have up on the screen, you'll see that one of the red blocks is KYC, or Know Your Customer. And you'll also see that we have transaction processing. And you'll also see that one of the core underlying building blocks is both a NoSQL database and a business rules management system. And what we're going to do is offer essentially a configurable dashboard in which you will be able to link, of course, customer information to transaction processing information to a set of rules that you have applied. And using that interface, you'll be able to configure your country's anti-money laundering requirements so that you can have flags and alerts that go off. But much of anti-money laundering is human process, in the sense that you have to say, you know, this category of account shouldn't be transferring money of this amount, you know, to off-network accounts in another country. So you have to know what your country's anti-money laundering rules are, what your regulators' rules are, and then but you're going to have the business rules engine, the fully auditable capture of every event going through the system, linked to accounts and a customer record. And through that dashboard, you will be able to implement various tiers of anti-money laundering. But at the end of the day, you or really the institution needs to know its regulators' procedures and rules. Okay.
And
everyone, shall we?
And once you're have that things implemented specifically based on the regulations you have in your country, and you are a smart guy, you would simply take that configuration and bring it back to the community so that others can use it too. But this would be the real core heart of open source.
And it's another example of the philosophy behind Mifos I/O, that we're going to provide, that everything comes down to configuration. We will be providing the core generic technical domains and the subdomains of KYC and portfolio management, transaction processing, that enable you to configure the service such that it meets the specific needs of your regulator, your region, and your customers, and their clients. And what this comes down to is your ability to focus on configuring the service and building the products and services and the apps that deliver them, and not having to spend your time down in the weeds. That's what Fineract or the Mifos IO framework will do for you. It's a fundamental changing of the value proposition, so you're not spending 80% of your customers' time and money on things that they never see and don't understand how they add value. Rather, you're spending your time and your customers' money on your value add, which is their products and services that meet the needs of their clients. Okay, we're reaching the top of the hour. Ed, do you have a closing comment to the community that you'd like to make?
Just want to thank everybody for joining us, and so we'll send out the recording of the webinar, and also just a reminder once again that our early bird registration for Tech Days is closing at the end of the month, so we'll be sending out some more emails around that, but look forward to engaging with everybody on Mifos IO and this transition to Apache Fineract. So thank you, everyone.
And thank you all for giving me the opportunity to talk to you today. Thank you for being members of our community, and we'll see you all through 2016.